equity through our presenters take over in just a second. Just a quick couple of reminders that the conference code of conduct is still in effect for the session. We're going to be recording this session, so after I step away, we're going to begin with that. But yeah, thank you so much for joining.
All right, well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. So my name is Debbie Baker. I'm the OER coordinator for the Maricopa County Community Colleges in the Phoenix, Arizona metropolitan area. And really happy to be here. And I'm going to have Lisa and Stephanie introduce themselves.
Hey everybody, so good to see you all, and thank you all for those of you online. My name is Lisa Young, and I serve as the faculty administrator for open education and innovation at the Maricopa Community Colleges. We're so happy to get to share our story with you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Green, and I'm Program Director of Food Nutrition at Phoenix College and also serve as a tri-chair for Open Maricopa.
Okay, so thank you again for being here. Let's see if I can get this right. All right, so here's our goals for today. This is what we're going to cover. This is what we hope to tackle. We're going to talk about implementing the equity through OER rubric. Were any of you in the session earlier today about the doers equity through OER rubric? Excellent. So some of this will make more sense to you then. We're going to talk a little bit about quality review programs in advancing equity within OER materials. It's a lot in 25 minutes. Like we were asking a lot of us and you. We're going to talk about fostering collaboration and community engagement through these equity-focused initiatives. And then we're going to talk about implementing an equity-driven strategy within this open education initiative. So a little bit about Maricopa and the Open Maricopa Initiative.
Yeah, Open Maricopa, we're part of 10 community colleges. We have over 100,000 students, 47% are first generation, 72% part-time. And, we started out with Maricopa Millions, over 10 plus years ago. I think it's more like 13 years ago now. And we've saved students a lot of money, right? And if you look at the top 50 courses, you can see that we approximately 37% of our spring 24 classes are OERs, ETC, and LTC. So we're making headway and just keep getting bigger and bigger each year.
Okay, so last year, we received an Equity Through OER rubric pilot grant from the Doers 3 organization to implement their Equity Through OER rubric to our program within Maricopa. So we were the only consortial organization that received this grant, and we were in great company with some other amazing institutions that received this grant to implement this rubric. But we needed to approach the implementing this rubric a little bit differently because we are a consortial group. We have 10 individually accredited community colleges across the Maricopa system. So what we did is we took that rubric and we dug into that rubric, and we had an amazing faculty member that really helped us transition that rubric into a survey. That rubric crosses over 3 different categories. It looks at students, practitioners, and leadership and administration. And then we drilled in through that survey. We asked individuals across our district that were familiar with open education in any of those areas to go through and complete this survey, telling us a little bit more about how open educational resources are in use in their space. Okay. Through the grant, we were asked to complete a gap analysis, which that survey was super helpful in allowing us to conduct a gap analysis of our system, to create an action plan of how we were going to address our findings from that gap analysis, to write a case study, and to produce a final report, right? Pretty straightforward grant expectations. And then this last link on here, going deeper into the promise of equity through OER, that is a press book of the results of the grant as a whole, not just Maricopa, but the implementation of the rubric more broadly across all of the institutions. So we really approach this not just as looking at the equity within the open educational resources themselves, but how those OER are being applied and used, and how well individuals across the system are familiar with open and whether they know how open can be used to address equity. So this is a look at the rubric. These are the scales of adoption, the different stages of the rubric. Let me just ask one more time, how many of you were in the session earlier with the rubric? Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right, so the rubric is very aspirational. The rubric is intended not to judge your program, not to poke holes into your program or to say, oh, well, we're just beginning in that space, like we really should be further along. But for institutions to be able to look at whether or not, like how they can grow within their open education program. And so it was a little tricky for us because our program is 10 years old, 10 plus years old, right? So it was really hard for us to not look at that and start judging and saying, oh gosh, we're 10 plus years old, it should be further along than it is. And for us to really, in fact, look at where we were at each stage of the way. So, and think about this really in that aspirational look from not present to beginning to emerging all the way up to an established space. So we, as I mentioned, we developed and distributed the survey, we analyzed the data, and then this is what we found. We found that in the student category, we were in that space between beginning and emerging, right? This isn't easy work. Even with an established program, even with a large system, which maybe makes it a little bit more challenging, right? It's not easy work. And so we've done good work, but we have room to grow, certainly. With practitioners, again, we're in that space between beginning and emerging, right? There's lots of things that our faculty are doing and the people that work with open education are doing across the district, but there's places for growth. It's not, we're not established, even 10 years in. And then finally, the leadership and accountability piece, we didn't get good results on that one. And that is in part, we think because we just didn't get a lot of respondents in that space to give us feedback from that survey, right? So very high level. So here was the analysis, right? We took that grant, very grateful to the Doers 3 organization for providing that opportunity, not just the rubric, but then the funding to allow us to conduct the study and then to do work with those findings, right? So this was the analysis piece. Yeah.
One thing that I want to add is, as we've kind of looked at this data, we had an opportunity to see the great work that Open Salt Lake Community College had done leveraging the rubric in the past. And we were trying really hard not to judge ourselves in this because we have done a lot of hard, good work. One of the things that really just dawned on me at this moment in the last 5 minutes with you all is the churn that we've had since COVID. Our students, of course, turn over every 2 to 6 years at the community colleges, but we've also had an incredible churn of our faculty, many of whom retired during COVID, and we have had almost an entire replacement of our leadership across the district twice since we started our open education efforts. And so it just dawned on me that, yeah, we have work to do there because we have so many new people and so many opportunities to help move us on that spectrum.
So, we obviously can't solve all the problems at the same time. So we approached this analysis, we really focused in on that practitioner piece. And we really dug in even more deeply to two parts of the rubric, the equity-centered instruction and pedagogy piece, and the quality of OER content. And those two dimensions of that category, we fell, the results of that survey showed us that we fell within that beginning, moving into emerging space. So what we did is we designed what we are calling Equity Plus, and we designed this Equity Plus review process. We did outreach to faculty that had created materials through our internal grant program to create a press book. And we looked specifically at the people that had created a press book over the past couple of years. And we reached out to them and asked them if they would be interested in going through this first iteration of what we were calling an Equity Plus review. And we were very, very grateful that we got 6 books, 5 faculty, one faculty had 2 books, that she said, absolutely, go for it. I'll take whatever feedback you can give me on my resources. And so we identified those 6 books happen across 4 of the Maricopa colleges. And those books, those faculty, collaborated with an OER specialist, one of the instructional designers at one of our 10 colleges. And that instructional designer worked over the summer to implement this, what we were calling an Equity Plus review. So when we designed this program, we really wanted to both leverage an equity rubric, right? The doers equity through OER rubric, it's about analyzing your initiative, right? That's about analyzing the capacity of what you're building in your space. We wanted an equity rubric to look at the resource itself. We really wanted to leverage hypothesis within the press book in order to provide feedback on the book for the author directly. We had big plans, and we really wanted to offer a tracking document so that as that OER specialist spent her time over the summer providing this review, then she would track all of the places where she was suggesting that the faculty author go back to. Okay, so it didn't quite work out as well as we had planned, but this was our first pass. This was our first attempt to conduct this type of a review. So what we ended up with is we found an Equity Plus rubric, we found an equity rubric, or we designed our Equity Plus rubric, there we go, based off of an equity rubric that had been designed by the Open Education Network. And in the true fashion of open, we identified that rubric, which itself had been adapted from a rubric created from Open Oregon earlier on. And we tweaked it and adjusted it so that it met our needs, and we added to it. So now this, and you'll have a link to a document that has all of these hyperlinks on them, so don't worry about that. What we added to the rubric, or what we built into that Equity Plus rubric, we built in dimensions around information equity, representation, consistency, and accessibility check, and attribution. So we still think we're going to solve all the problems, all the equity problems in these books in the summer that we had, right? And we were very grateful for that OER specialist, that instructional designer at that college. Her leadership was willing to give her the time to help us conduct this review for books from across the district. And she looked specifically, in addition to these elements, we also added to the rubric a column around the relevance to the student learning experience. We felt that this was really important, not feedback to give back to the faculty authors of the books, and not just to tell them like, oh, you were good here and not so good there, but for them to get that big picture of why that element, that thing, like information equity, why is that relevant to the student learning experience? We went through and provided reviewer feedback, again, not just like, oh, you good here, great there, but more narrative feedback about what could be improved. And then identified some places where things absolutely had to change. In particular, this came up around accessibility mostly, right? Well, if through that process, we identified places where alt text needed to happen, or where like color contrast was not appropriate to pass accessibility standards or things like that. So on here is a QR code to the Equity Plus rubric. If you want to open that up and take a look at it, is a lot of words on a page, and it didn't take a pretty picture very well to give you on the slide. But as I mentioned, at the end, we're going to give you another QR code to a Google Doc where you will have links to all of these resources. So here's the process. So a personal review. That OER specialist went through and conducted a personal review. She read every word of every book, and that took a lot more time than either one of us had anticipated. And then she did an AI review using GetLiner. And she used the AI tool in particular around cultural perspective. And part of that was because she really felt like, one, she's not a subject matter expert, so she didn't know as well, like, oh, this passage of this psychology book really has a single cultural perspective. What else could be added here, right? So we didn't want to just tell the faculty, do more in this space. We wanted to give them an idea of what could be done there. So we dropped the prompt in here, and this was the prompt that she used with the AI tool. So she asked that AI tool to analyze a passage for cultural perspective. So using her judgment as to whether what was being given in that space was a single cultural perspective and might need more feedback to the faculty, captured that passage and put it back in and said, what else could be added here? We found this was a very time-consuming process. In particular, in reading and evaluating. We found that there were fewer alt text issues than we expected. That those 6 books really passed that accessibility check fairly well. We also found that there was a lot of problems with naming representation. And so that in particular led us to identify opportunities for professional development across the district in such a way that the next time we offer opportunities for faculty to create resources, they would then be able, we could go alongside that. And instead of talking repeatedly about alt text, we can tell them also, here are some things to think about when you're using naming conventions through your book and why that's important. We identified ongoing opportunities for collaboration, both with that OER specialist and the faculty SME. When we do this again, we probably won't do it over the summer when the faculty aren't available. We will do it during the academic year so that the OER specialist can have that faculty subject matter expert on hand to ask questions of it directly rather than having to wait 3 months until they're back. We would like to do this again with the librarian. We found that attribution check, there was only so much that the OER specialist could do. And it was really almost like a sampling, she said, of checking for attribution and double checking that things were correct or appeared to be correct through the book. And then And really, I've heard a couple of other presentations, even just today, talk about the value of a team, really approaching this review cycle through a team-based approach and bringing in more peer review. So, sorry, I just got carried away.
So one of the things that we're really going to do about peer review is we just got one of the open textbook pilot grants. We were really surprised. We, applied a while ago, and then a year later we noticed that we got the award. And so and I wrote these down because I didn't want to forget. We are going to develop a rubric of rubrics and a platform for it in cooperation with OLI at Carnegie Mellon. And we are going to develop rubrics that leverage e-learning, subject matter copy editing, accessibility in UDL, copyright and OER clearance, and culturally responsive pedagogies. And so we have 13 higher ed partners with this, as well as some organizations. We're so excited, and I see many of you in this room that are partnering with us. We're so excited about this opportunity, and we will be sharing it regularly through all of the different listservs. So we're really excited about our opportunity to expand peer review and provide an open peer review tool for all of us. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, this is a really big project, and like I said, it either took way more time, as most new projects do. It's like, oh, it's gonna take 2 hours. Oh no, it does, quadruple that, right? So it's just ongoing. I just think of it as a layer and a layer, and we're just gonna keep going and adding, and eventually we'll get closer to where we want to be, right?
Yes.
And one other thing that I just want to note is that this was Debbie's brainchild here. I mean, she imagined this and came up with it and developed all of these facets. She's absolutely amazing, and we're so lucky to have her in our awesome open community. So with that, questions? We've got a minute left. Yeah.
That was a great presentation. I'll bring the, you sure this works? All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So, the question, you were talking about like how much time it took. And so I was just really curious, and this could be way too much of a process question. And so I already want to say, forgive me to everybody in the audience. So what were the time intensive tasks? Like
Reading.
what were they? The reading?
Reading. So we had negotiated, we'll call it, 10 hours a week of this OER specialist. And that her supervisor said she could devote 10 hours a week through the summer months to this project. And 10 hours a week was not enough time to read, right? She needed to read each of those books. And so she was going home and spending 2 hours every other night reading. It was like as if she was a student in a class, in that particular class, right? Because she couldn't get through the reading of the book in enough time to meet our deadline. We set a deadline of October 7th that for us to give the reviews back to the faculty, and we haven't met that deadline. We met that deadline on 4 of the 6 books, and then we she's got 2 more books that she's scrambling to get done, right? So our estimate, and she was part of the process of designing the review process and all of that, and working with us to say, well, how much time do you think it will take? And these are the books that volunteered to be a part of it. And it just, that was the bottom line. It's just the reading and the thinking time goes alongside that reading. That's what took way more time than either one of us had estimated.
Thank you.
I just want to recognize Jessica Parsons is the OER specialist, and she came through the ranks as a student specialist and now is full-time. And so she did incredible work with this, and definitely need to send that out, that Jessica Parsons from Paradise Valley Community College did a great job and did these reviews.
And I'll go alongside that and say, oh, we have to stop, but I'm just gonna also shout out to Christine Jones, who built the survey for us. So thank you very much to Christine if she's out there. And that's it. Thank you very much.